And we are back again with another episode of From College to Combine. Welcome back to Riley, who has his microphone in his hand. How are you doing today?
2 weeks in a row now with a microphone. It's a hot streak.
I know. And once again with the backwards hat. So you kind of look like 7, 8?
I got a haircut today, and I don't have any product in it, so it kind of just like flops like that, and I think it looks dumb. So I'm gonna wear a hat.
Okay, fair
It makes
enough.
me
I
look
think I
old.
think I think it gives you like one more year maybe. So maybe like you're flirting with teenhood, you know?
Yeah, nice jacket.
Yeah, you know what? I've been commenting on before. Shout out to Doug and Deej, who constantly
I thought
make
he
fun
made
of it,
fun
but
of
it's
you for
very
it.
it's very comfy. It's very comfy. And that's what matters. You know, and speaking of things that matter, I get you went to the Red Sox game earlier, and this is a fantasy football show, right? How did that go for you?
Yeah, $20. I bet on the Red Sox to win, and they flopped pretty badly. One hit until the ninth inning, and then Trevor Story struck out for the third time, stranding runners on second and third. So I'm on a little bit of a cold streak today. I was planning on betting the match today, the golf match with all these quarterbacks.
Golf
I
match.
decided not to. I'm on a cold streak, so I decided to take a day off, but I was tempted. I'll say that.
Well, you know how to warm up a cold streak with a fans football show, and that's what we're going to do today. With talking about sleepers later, we're going to get into some NFL headlines as we always do. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our host for frequency's sake. That's where you're watching this right now. Great guys, definitely worth a follow on Twitter, Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. Great shows every single week there. And of course, IDP Guys, where I am currently writing, putting out a weekly newsletter, brand new. Check out my Twitter at Michael_Sicoli, or 2 underscores. I can't speak, but check that out. We just launched it this week with your IDP news, links to articles on the website, some important IDP Guys content, things you can check out, and I put a lot of work into it every week, so I appreciate anyone who subscribes to it. Totally free to do so. So yeah, let's get into this. Let's get into some headlines. Riley, we're gonna kick that off because it's not a huge week. I think we had some bigger things in weeks past, but which one do you want to start with? I like to throw it your way to start.
I'll bring up the one I want to mention first. My favorite headline of the week was Travis Etienne saying he wants to be used like Deebo Samuel, which I thought was honestly a pretty interesting headline. And I'm sure the words that he's saying don't carry a lot of weight, but I think it speaks to how quickly Deebo's role in that offense has taken a hold of this position player or skill player culture. Is that everyone either wants to be like him and play that position and follow in his footsteps, or put up the amount of success that he had last year. So in terms of like legitimate fantasy impact, I think it has very little. I think Doug Peterson is a little more of a cookie cutter coach, which isn't a bad thing. I just don't think he's going to use a weapon like Etienne in ways like Deebo was used. But I think it's just a fun look at how good Deebo was last year.
See, I would object to cookie cutter because this is still a
Maybe
Super
not
Bowl
cookie
winning.
cutter, but he's older and he's run some interesting offenses. But he's more of a X's and O's type of coach who is a plug and play kind of guy. Like he wouldn't have done what Kyle Shanahan did with Deebo, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Kyle Shanahan's a very unique coach, and I agree. We're not gonna. And Etienne was asked shortly after this comment, "Is like, are you thinking about switching to wide receivers?" Like, no, we're not switching to wide receiver. He's gonna be a running back. But we have seen this before. I forget who said it last year, but people have talked about how they want to get more involved in the passing game, and then a lot of the times that is also echoed when that builds against their skill set. If all of a sudden Nick Chubb says, "I want to catch 50 balls this year," I don't care because he's not going to do that. But Etienne is a guy that is made to catch passes. He is made to work with Trevor Lawrence, who is his quarterback from Clemson and now in Jacksonville. This is blowing out of proportion to say Deebo Samuel. Is blowing out of proportion to say a top 10 RB1 season's coming. But I think top 12 and 20 is well within not just the range of outcomes, but I think that you can definitely project for him. I saw an interesting poll on Twitter, Raleigh. I'm actually curious your take on it. Would you take Travis Etienne right now? There's a dynasty angle of it. Or a 2023 first totally bets off on where that lands?
If I don't know where the first will be, I'll take Etienne. if I can be assured the pick is top 5 or 6, I'd rather have that pick. But my thing with picks is I don't like having to punt the value of this asset a year down the road, and then after I take a player with that pick, let it mature for another year, especially when we know that Etienne is going to be a pretty big part of this offense and he has some legitimate upside.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And to the tune of sending a pick for a person who could break out now, something I've been telling people to do all offseason is to do the same with Parris Campbell, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And I know Riley's doing an immediate deep side that I'm bringing him
I
up
can't
again.
believe we're talking about him again. I can't
Listen,
escape him.
I'm not sure if you have followed my Twitter over the last week or so or 2 weeks, but I'm officially planting my flag. Parris Campbell is not just a my guy like he's always been, but it's gonna happen this year. Riley, it's happening this year. Parris Campbell, he's healthy, he's at OTAs. We talked about that 2 weeks ago or so. Now he's working with the first team. That's what we want to see. Granted, yes, it's May, but he's opening with the first team as I wanted to see, as I thought he would do, working in that slot. He caught 8 of 24 passes from Matt Ryan in the media session. They seem to have a great connection. And this is, again, early. We're not going to blow it out of proportion, but I am saying that the breakout's happening, and it's gonna we're gonna get a good season out of Parris Campbell this year. I just hope he stays healthy, and if he doesn't, that's just fluky. But it's gonna happen, Riley. That's all I'm gonna tell you.
Cool.
I took.
Please.
Go. Use your microphone.
I actually maybe this actually might be my favorite headline of the week was Akiem Hicks signing with the Bucks. Do we know the details on this contract?
It's a 1-year, $10 million contract.
How can that be possible? How do they do this? I know the cap is fake, but this is really pushing the limits of the cap being fake.
It happens because it's incentive heavy. I'm pretty sure. I looked at it because I also wrote about this in the IDP Guys newsletter that came out this morning. Again, check that out. Subscribe to it because IDP content like this definitely worth checking out. But he's the Ndamukong Suh replacement. Suh's not gonna. I can't imagine they bring back Suh. They're gonna just replace him with Hicks. Hicks can move all across the line, and his issue has been health. He's missed 15 games over the last 3 seasons. But he hasn't been a steady IDP producer either because he's not necessarily getting to the quarterbacks. But he was still on pace for a really good season in terms of sacks and tackles for a loss for a guy of his skill set. So I think he can still have streamable value for redraft IDP purposes. He's obviously a little bit up there in age. The injury is a risk. The upside is limited, but there are some things to like that in plus matchups where you might be able to predict a sack against weaker offensive lines. I could like Akiem Hicks this year for IDP. But yes, the cap has always been fake, and at this point we need to stop questioning it because I don't know how it works. It's like flipping a coin, and eventually it lands.
Yes. Eventually, tails will fail, and you'll
eventually every single time, 100% of the time, it'll land Tom Brady's way. On to OTAs, we have a couple interesting showings. Kyler and Diontae Johnson, Kyler Murray and Diontae Johnson have shown up to their voluntary OTAs amidst their contract disputes, which is a little bit surprising. But Riley, what did you take away from that? Because I have some ideas about it.
I've never really cared about the contract situations. That's like the popular hot thing to do right now is threaten to hold out and then show up anyway. I don't pay too much attention to this sort of stuff. I mean, maybe Kyler showing up is a somewhat bigger deal because he really took the extra step with his contract situation by having his agent put out a very detailed statement about why he deserves a better contract than they're offering to him. So maybe that's worth a little bit more than I think it is. But at the end of the day, I think we all knew this was what's going to happen.
I think this is an example of leverage, right? Where Kyler has some more leverage. Like the Cardinals can't go without him. The Steelers, they do this all the time, and they just got a new GM. It's going to be a lot of status quo, and status quo is not paying these guys. And Diontae, realistically, has no leverage here. If he sits out, then he sits out. He loses a lot of money to do so. He hits free agency after waiting a whole year of no football. It's not good for Diontae to sit out. It's not good for the Steelers to sit out. But I think ultimately that he's going to play this year as is. and he's going to walk in free agency. That's kind of been the Steeler way. I don't think Omar Khan, the new GM, is going to change that. You have George Pickens, Chase Claypool, and they'll add someone in next year's free agency group because they have a lot of cap space pushing towards 2023. But ultimately, I'm not too surprised either. I'm a little bit surprised he showed up to voluntary work, but I never thought this would be an issue long term, and it definitely doesn't look to be now. But we'll stay in Pittsburgh with Najee Harris jumping to 244 pounds. This, it's such a mixed group with this, where people saying, who cares? Some people saying that he was on 240 last year, which I don't think he was, and other people saying this is a sign of concern. Riley, do you have any takes on Mr. Harris?
I will say that 99% of Twitter are not dietitians or athletic trainers, especially those who work with next level NFL athletes like Najee Harris. So I trust the very trained professionals who advise Najee Harris to get up to 245 if he wants, if they think, that's the best career move for him and that's what's going to help them win games, even though what Najee Harris did last year was totally fine. He ended up as a top 5 running back, I'm pretty sure. And he was a great player right out of college. I mean, if you had asked me, would you rather Najee Harris stay at 225, 230, where I think he was last year, or jump up to 245, I would have said, don't fix what's not broken and let him just stay at 230. But I'm interested to see what happens with this. Like, you made the comp to Derrick Henry when we were talking about this, is that Najee Harris is pretty much the same size as Derrick Henry now. And maybe that means something. Maybe Najee is trying to be the next Derrick Henry, and in which case would be great. I think Najee Harris is capable of that. But otherwise, I'm not totally concerned.
Derrick Henry does have 2 inches on him, so this is even more weight on a slighter frame. I don't like it when running backs put on weight. I'm not going to overreact to this. It doesn't change my projections for him. I'm still going to put him down as a top 10 running back based on volume and improved offensive line, but I don't like it. Ultimately, I don't. I acted like I did to you because You're
hopeful Steelers fan, what you are.
Well, because I was in denial for a little bit, but I tweeted out shortly after. I was like, yeah, it's not good when running backs put on weight. It increases their chance of injury, and it slows his hit. It slows how fast he can hit the hole. And they showed videos. His speed doesn't look adjusted. His feet are still moving just like that. But for a running back that was hit, had one of the worst yards before contact in the league. Now he's got to hit the hole a little bit faster maybe it was all the offensive line. Maybe it was a bit him being slow. Who knows? Either way, I don't like it. Doesn't change anything for me. It's just kind of something that we're talking about because it's May/June. All right, Riley. Before we get into the sleepers, I want to touch on one thing. The IDP guys did just drop the IDP Draft Kit. So a lot of people, including Riley here, have not really touched with the IDP space yet. But this draft kit has everything you need to make it a lot less intimidating than you could possibly think. Everything from profiles, from sleepers to breakouts, all available at IDP guys. Just order below, or not order below, but order. It'll be in the link in this YouTube video description, and you could also check it out at IDP guys. Definitely worth an investment. Definitely, IDP is a lot of fun. It's a lot more interesting when you start putting not just names, but you want more football in your life. And when you put football in your life, that means you touch on the defensive end too. We talk offense all the time, Riley. We do.
I know. How crazy.
All right. I'm sick of Patrick Mahomes. All right. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of Najee Harris. I want some Darius Leonard love. I want some Forsade Alukum, love. But either way, definitely worth checking out. Either way. We're gonna get into the meat of the show because we're gonna talk about sleepers, Riley. I'll kick it off.
Please, by all means.
I'll kick it off with Matt Ryan, a quarterback that switched teams, went away from the stinky Falcons to the soon-to-be AFC South champions, Indianapolis Colts. Matt Ryan did not look good last year. Did not play well last year. When you lose Calvin Ridley, your number 1 target right before the season, that happens. When you have Kyle Pitts, who's a great player but still a rookie, as your only weapon, that's going to happen. Matt Ryan still had pretty good accuracy stats, both downfield and in the intermediate range. The arm did lack some zip. He took some more hits than he was accustomed to. But I think that's all going to change in Indianapolis, where A, he's going to have a much more stable rushing attack. B, he's going to have better coaching. C, he's going to have actual weapons. Michael Pittman, the aforementioned Parris Campbell, a nice stable of tight ends as well between Jelani Woods and a capable blocker in Mo Alley Cox. You got second-year Colin Granson for whatever he could contribute. I'm not going to count on that. And then he also has one of the league's best offensive lines. He opens the season against Houston and Jacksonville, and he'll play those teams twice a year as well. For a guy that's going off the board is what I believe it was the QB 19, QB 17, the QB 19 actually. For someone who's going that late, totally, you could wait until your last pick. You can take Matt Ryan and count on a top 15, maybe top 12. He'll flirt with top 12 in week 1 and 2. You get a multi-week starter for nothing, and then you can stream the position after. Matt Ryan's been a target for me all offseason since he joined the Colts. I think Michael Pittman's going to have a fantastic year. I think Parris Campbell's capable of a breakout year. Yeah, it's all going to come from Matt Ryan. And I check out a Parris Campbell thread I put out on Twitter because that also touches on Matt Ryan and how I think the Colts are going to throw the ball a little bit more than they did last year. And Frank Reich's come out and said that as well. He said that he does not want the Colts to be as run-heavy because we've seen run-heavy teams, and they don't go the distance. They go far, but they don't go the distance. I think they're going to need more balanced attack. I think Matt Ryan's going to give it to him. He's a good sleeper candidate for your quarterback position.
What a night and day change for the situation for Matt Ryan. It's I wonder if he's gonna like go into shock. You know how like you fall into a wet or a cold swimming pool and you just go into shock. I mean that's
yes.
I feel like that could happen with him.
I'll throw that in as well. That 2 straight years a quarterback got traded and then won the Super Bowl.
It's true. That is very true.
I'm just saying. I mean, there could be a trend here. You know, and Matt Ryan, all of a sudden, Super Bowl ring, not with the Falcons, but with the Colts. No, that's not going to happen. But I do think the Colts are actually going to win the AFC South.
I'll give you another sleeper quarterback. Derek Carr is being drafted as the QB 16 right now, according to Fantasy Pros ADP. Last year, Derek Carr finished as the QB 13, and of course, he had the beginning of the season where he was red hot and. Darren Waller was healthy and Hunter Renfrow was beginning to break out. And we were all like, wow, Derek Carr's finally, becoming something. And now the Raiders have committed to Derek Carr with a multi-year big extension. They traded for Devontae Adams, the best wide receiver in football, and he's being drafted behind where he finished last year as QB 16. I think QB 16 is the floor for him. If he finished as the QB 10, I wouldn't be surprised. I would say his ultimate max ceiling is about QB 8. And if everything went right, perfectly right for the Raiders, I think he could hit that. I will bet on him finishing QB 10 to 12. I think he's a pretty good sleeper based on where his ADP is right now, based on how much the offense has improved and how the Raiders committed to him, and based on how they played last year, is letting him throw the ball a lot more than he has in previous years in his career.
Now, you know how I feel about Derek Carr. Right, I'm
very familiar.
As anti-Derek Carr as he comes, his ceiling it's much higher than QB8. His ceiling is, to me, it's top 4. I think it's top 4, and I realize that the rushing, the top 5 maybe, but the rushing volume is probably going to keep him in that QB8 range. That's probably why you're saying that, because he's not sneaking in 5 touchdowns. He's not running for 4 or 500 yards. But he does have Devontae Adams. He has Darren Waller. He has Hunter Renfrow. This is by far the best group he has. And despite losing a star in Bryan Edwards, Derek Carr is still going to be have the highest ceiling he's ever had. And he's been around that QB8 range before. He's flirted with it before. So I think he could be even higher. I think he's a great target late in drafts, as much as I dislike him. Although you do have to factor in the schedule. Going against KC, the Chargers, and Denver is no fun.
It's a tough schedule, and the Raiders hung around with all those teams at different points last year. So I wouldn't bet on them having to throw the ball a lot late in games. And now they have Devontae Adams along with Hunter Renfrow, who's a great player, and Darren Waller, who looks to be healthy.
Yep, I agree with that all, and I'll move on to my sleeper running back. And that is going to be for another team that I expect to win the division. Rachaad White, rookie out of Arizona State, I think is very primed for a bigger season than people might think. And I think it'll start slower. So maybe he might not be a draft pick. He'll be picked maybe in that 11th, 12th round. If you want to have the patience, you have a deep enough bench, hold on to him. But I think there's a real world to fantasy relevance, and here's how it's going to happen. Both Ronald Jones leaves 111 touches gone. Most of those are carries. But Leonard Fournette, I don't think is going to get every single touch. I don't think his body can A, hold up to it, and B, I don't think they're going to do that after they give him a lot of money. They need him around. So I think Rachaad White's going to factor in on the ground game. That's going to amp up across the season. But where I'm really excited is in the passing game. Leonard Fournette played well as a receiver, but that's not his forte. That's never been his forte. He's been, prior to the Bucs, he was one of the worst receiving running backs in the league, and he got force-fed a ridiculous amount of targets from me. Riley, do me a favor, because I forgot to check it, but check how many targets Leonard Fournette got. Because I think Rachaad White's going to touch on a lot of those. Amount. Yeah, and we've seen since Tom Brady's got to Tampa that he's been trying to get that pass catcher running back. He pushed them to get James White. They tried to get they got Gio Bernard, and they've tried factoring in a lot of people because they throw to it. They threw to Leonard Fournette a lot, and I think Rachaad White could get
84 times, 84 targets.
84 targets. Now that's probably good for what, like 74 catches, give or take?
69 catches 69. For 450 yards.
So 69 catches to Leonard Fournette. I think it's very possible that Rachaad White's seeing 50 receptions. He goes for very late in drafts, and that's also touching on big play rushing ability. He is a fast, explosive runner. I started off a little bit low on him in the process. I rose on him across the offseason. I think he landed a fantastic spot behind a great offensive line in Tampa and a good system. I think Rachaad White's somebody I'm going to take a shot on and keep a very close eye on waivers if he ends up there. And I wouldn't be against taking him if I take Leonard Fournette earlier either. I don't think that's handicapping me, or I don't think that's holding me back. I think that's more so both high-level insurance and he could have standalone value as well.
I think when I was talking about Rachaad White, when we were doing all the rookies, I was half right about him. I said, I really like Rachaad White. He's a talented player. I just don't think he'll get drafted high enough to be fantasy relevant. And then he became a third-round pick. So I'm pretty in on Rachaad White. I like his talent, and the Bucs saw that too. So I think he'll be used accordingly. My breakout running back is going to be Kareem Hunt, who missed about half the year last year. He only played 8 games, so he finished as the running back, like 48-ish. And I'm taking this pick purely because of what the offense could be, right? So if you look at the second half of the year, assuming Deshaun Watson will be back for the second half, as we've said plenty of times on the show, we're expecting him to miss about the first half of the year for suspension. Let's look at where Kareem Hunt is being drafted on Sleeper. Around the RB30 range, so he's being drafted behind Tony Pollard, is a good player, but will be in a timeshare, as will Kareem Hunt. But Miles Sanders being drafted ahead of him, Damian Harris, James Cook, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who flopped last season, Elijah Mitchell, who's a question mark. So I think his ceiling compared to a lot of these players is much higher. And we've seen Kareem Hunt have fantastic seasons while playing alongside Nick Chubb. I mean, he's finished. Let's see where he's finished. He's finished as the RB10 in 2020, and obviously we saw his talent when he finished top 8 twice when he was with the Chiefs. And I think he's still as talented, and I don't think the motivation to use him is going to go away for the Browns. So I think based on his ceiling, I think he could be worth a top 25 pick ahead of some of the names that are being drafted above him, like the Elijah Mitchells and the CEHs and the Miles Sanders of that group.
Yep, I do see the route for it. Because as much as I am a Nick Chubb guy, Kareem Hunt has been really high in points per game. Like, he's missed time over the last 2 seasons. Like, obviously last year, and then even in 2020, I believe he missed time as well. But points per game is where Kareem Hunt has thrived. When he's on the field, he's being used, and when he's being used, he's been good with it. He's getting a little bit up there in age, I think, but he's still younger than 26. We all think, right? 26. That's 26, what I'm saying. He feels like he should be 28, right?
Yeah, he broke out super young.
He's just had so much that's gone on with him. Most of it, some of it negative, and I'll never like Kareem Hunt, but it's for fantasy purposes, I definitely see the route, and this should be a much improved offense too, where touchdown upside is even higher. Kareem Hunt was used on the goal line to the dismay of we Nick Chubb truthers. But I'm going to move on to my sleeper wide receiver, a guy that I wanted to bring up last week. I touched on it that I was going to. I was teasing to a team that has 241 vacated wide receiver targets. Just wide receiver. 241 vacated targets. They brought in a second-round rookie to replace that, a 28-year-old, 29-year-old irrelevant veteran journeyman in Sammy Watkins, the rookie being Christian Watson. Of course, I'm talking about Allen Lazard, the wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers. Allen Lazard is going to be on the field for 90% of snaps in every single game. That's not just because of his receiving ability. That's because he's a good blocker. That makes him an every down type of player, somebody that's going to be unbelievably valuable to Aaron Rodgers, who trusts Lazard. Aaron Rodgers has given Lazard a few balls that people have been like, why are you doing that? They have a connection there. There's something there that he doesn't have to wait to build with Christian Watson, with Romeo Doubs in the fourth. Sammy Watkins, who hasn't even shown up to OTAs, who that Matt LaFleur has already come out and said, I don't like that. So I don't even know if Sammy Watkins is going to be on the team. You can push him out of your mind because it's Sammy Watkins. What you don't want to push out of your mind is Allen Lazard and the great opportunity he has with 241 vacated targets. And yes, I think Green Bay is going to run even more than they did last year. And they ran a fair amount last year. I think Allen Lazard is going to see a large market share and a good amount of touchdown potential because it's Aaron Rodgers and he's unbelievably efficient in the red zone. And when Aaron Rodgers gets the ball in his hands, he's throwing for the guy he trusts. That's going to be both Bob Tonyan and Allen Lazard. For the market share that Allen Lazard can command at the wide receiver 55 mark, I'm taking that shot in every single draft. There's genuine top 24 upside given his volume potential and his touchdown ability in Allen Lazard. I'm not going to project him for top 24, but I'll project him for a wide receiver 3 season that can get 20 spots after that.
Allen Lazard flashed at some points at the end of last year.
He's not that player.
He became the tall, big body, go up and get a receiver that he's supposed to be. And a lot of people, like, I remember one tweet, I forget who said it, but they were like, if Allen Lazard can't, win a jump ball against DBs that are 5 inches smaller than him, what can he do? And he started doing that at the end of last year. So, as I own him in a couple dynasty leagues, and I'm excited to see what happens because the whole thing with Aaron Rodgers is that he has to trust you, and he's the only guy left that he trusts. So
Devontae Adams is gone. Marcus Valdes-Scantling is gone. They brought in Romeo Doubs, a 4th-round rookie. Christian Watson, a raw 2nd-round prospect who has been struggling at OTAs to date. And they have Randall Cobb. They have Sammy Watkins, both guys whose prime were back when the dinosaurs existed. So there's such a perfect route for Allen Lazard. And I do think he's a good player. This isn't just throwing targets at an untalented player. But I could genuinely go on. I will talk about it more this offseason, I'm sure. But who's your sleeper, Riley?
My sleeper wide receiver, and I'm talking sleeper here. I'm not banking on there's no top 24 upside with this guy, but I'm going to talk about DJ Chark, who recently signed with the Detroit Lions. So, the Lions we're expecting to be a lot better team than they were last year, and they heavily invested in their wide receiver room by trading up for Jameson Williams. Amon-Ra St. Brown broke out. TJ Hawkinson is still around. So this is a fairly crowded room that DJ Chark is now a part of. But I think he flashed in some spots when he was with the Jaguars, and he's missed a whole lot of time with injuries. He only played 3.5 games last year. But I think it speaks that the Lions went out and signed him. I don't think Jared Goff is a hamstring. I think he's a fine quarterback who will get your wide receiver some decent fantasy days and not a whole lot more. So there's a more of a ceiling with DJ Chark than his wide receiver 62 ADP shows. I think if everything goes right for him, his ceiling is, maybe top 40, top 35, I think. And that's a decent payoff for where you'd be drafting him. He could be a solid late round pick, but he's a guy I'll be eyeing. Like, his overall ADP is 151. So if that's like a 13th round pick. If your 13th round pick can turn into a wide receiver 3, which I think is the case for him, then that's a very solid investment.
Yeah. And honestly, when you're going late in drafts, if you can land a wide receiver 3, if you can stream him on certain weeks, it's not just it's not just someone you could play in your lineup, it's someone you could trade as well. I think that gets lost as well. Like, if you land someone late and if you go wide receiver heavy, that doesn't mean you don't take him later. If he can hit, you can still trade him. So I like that pick. I'm going to move on to my sleeper tight end, my last sleeper of the bunch. And this is a guy that I was not high on coming out. I still am not super high on this. Is somebody who's going tight end 30 in ADP currently. So totally left for dead. And if he doesn't hit, kick him to the curb. Who cares? No dollars lost. We're talking pennies. All right. This is Brevin Jordan of the Houston Texans. So the Texans have lost 170 targets this offseason. I keep using vacated targets because that represents market share and opportunity. They also lost Jordan Akins, who was their starting tight end last year. Brevin Jordan is pretty much the lone starter. He should walk into that role, and they haven't made any efforts to kind of replace him. They're giving him this, and that's because of how well he played at the end of last season. Do you want to guess how many games he had with over 8 fantasy points? Which for a tight end, he had what's it called? He had 3 very fantasy relevant games in nine performances for a rookie tight end. That might not sound like much. He had 3 games where you could start him and be satisfied out of 9. That's a 33% return rate on a guy who wasn't even starting and spent half the year as a healthy scratch. He's an athletic guy who can go up and get it. It's Houston offense that's not going to be good, but it's also going to be playing from behind. I'm a believer in Davis Mills, but I'm also not counting on it. I recognize that this pick could be nothing, but then you just cut him. And he has a lot of opportunity with a market share with a team that just has Brandon Cooks. And then they drafted John Mechie, who might not be ready with the start of the season, coming off the ACL tear in the winter. And then they have Nico Collins, who's totally unproven as well. I like Nico Collins, but literally nothing to suggest that he's anything more than a depth piece at this point. He has not flashed enough for me to give him anything else. So Brevin Jordan has an opportunity to be the number 2 target for this team. The starting tight end he will be, barring injury. That's a good opportunity to get for a guy that profiles as an athletic guy who can, make plays after the catch. So if opportunity comes and athleticism's there and game script will be there week in, week out, if you totally punt the position, it might be worth a look. At the very least, someone I'm going to be looking very closely on waivers for sure.
He was a target for me, like in dynasty startups, like way late. And I'm willing to be late on him for redrafts. I'd be willing to, let him have a couple double-digit games before I really give him a serious look. But that's just the name of the game when you're talking about tight ends, which it feels like we're doing every week. Like, oh, let's talk about some tight ends, because even though we joke about how much of a crapshoot it is.
Well, that's why, right?
Let's talk about my
I mean, that's why though, right? I mean, we're talking about the crapshoot because if you find that diamond in the rough, oh my goodness, it's such a difference maker. And I don't think that can happen with Brevin Jordan this year. I don't think the top 5 is in the realm of outcomes. And we acknowledge that outside of the top 5, you lose a lot of interest. But if he lands in the top 10 in points per game, he can still be a streaming candidate that is worthy more weeks than not, that he's not even on your radar most likely right now. But if he becomes a streaming candidate at the tight end 30 price, that's good upside. The worry is touchdowns. That's not going to come in Houston. But, if Davis Mills makes a huge step, either way, good streaming candidate on more weeks than not. Let's talk more tight ends, Riley. What do you got in the?
I'll go kind of the opposite situation. Is that there should be plenty of tight ends or touchdowns to go around in this offense. And Albert Okwuegbunam is being drafted as the tight end 17 as a part of the Denver Broncos, who now have Russell Wilson as their quarterback. It's a very crowded room with Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick as their wide receivers, plus a very strong running back duo. So Alberto might be pretty far down on the pecking order per se, but he's their starting tight end now that they traded Noah Fant to get Russell Wilson. So obviously there's a little bit of faith in Alberto. He flashed at some points when he was spot starting with the Broncos with Drew Lock at quarterback. And with this one, you're just going to try to get lucky, grab some fluky touchdowns and an offense that will have touchdowns flying from everywhere. And at tight end 17, that's a decent gamble to take. Again, at that range, that's tight end 17 is pennies. You could draft him way at the end of the draft, and it won't cost you anything. And if you're lucky, he'll give you a 1, maybe 2 touchdown game here and there, and you'll be happy with it.
I find myself out on Alberto as much as I try to be in on him, just because he's athletic and a good offense. I really worry about the the crowded room, like you mentioned. But I mean, there's also instances where tight ends don't need a ton of volume. Dawson Knox was not catching 8 balls a game; he was catching 8 touchdowns a game. It felt like. So if that can happen, if Denver takes the leap that we're projecting them to, if Russell Wilson can find a close to MVP level form, you want every piece of that offense. And ultimately, with tight end, you just want touchdowns. And Alberto can definitely give you some based on that upside. And I like Greg Dulcich, who they drafted behind him, athletic guy, or semi-athletic. Either way, I think he's a good receiver. But rookies won't impact his performance on them. So Alberto will stand alone there for sure. Well, Riley, that is our sleepers for the show. I feel like I miss you. I miss you, Riley. That's how I want to end the show. I'm talking to, of course, the Clyde Edwards-Helaire helmet behind you.
God bless him. God bless him.
God bless him indeed. God bless him indeed. Hope it happens this year. I just made it sound like I'm the CEH truther. But either way, thank you guys for tuning in for another amazing show. I had a lot of fun this week, Riley. More than usual. Maybe it's because the hat. I don't know. Or maybe it's the microphone.
Hat makes me fun. Makes me fun guy.
It definitely makes you something. So next week we'll be back talking about bus, because that ultimately, we're talking about the fun stuff. Now we got to talk about the landmines to avoid. We're going to do that next week on next week's show, Wednesday, 7:00. You know where to be, right here. Follow for frequency's sake on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. Subscribe. YouTube is probably the best place for their amazing content. It's where you're going to find us. It's where you're going to find all the amazing other shows that they check out. And they keep bringing on new shows. They brought on the one from last week that we just touched on, or we touched on from last week. Check out last week's show for sure. Also follow IDP Guys on Twitter. It's where I'm putting out a lot of my content, and a lot of other content producers I respect greatly are putting out their amazing stuff, both offense and defense. IDP is not as intimidating as you think. There's a lot of tools on there and a great community to figure it out. Open up your mind, expand a little bit. Riley, you could use some expansion of the mind.
That's so terrible.
I'm out of here. I don't miss you anymore. Either way, I've been saying either way a lot. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody. Enjoy it.